in both Bush administrations at the White House and the State Department, and then in the Defense Department. And this book is a reflection in part of my long-standing interest in the relationship between law and policy. And in that respect, it fills a gap between books on strategy and books on international law. And not very many works try to examine the two of them together.
I'm Noel Lateef, President of the Foreign Policy Association, and I am pleased to reaffirm my personal belief that the UN Charter is critical to our international system and to a peaceful world. Thank you.
Just died at 100.
Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Noel Lateef, President of the Foreign Policy Association, and I have to commend you for braving the heat today to join us, and it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Nicholas Rostow. I've known Nick since we were classmates in law school. We served together on the editorial board of the Yale Journal of World Public Order, renamed the Yale Journal of International Law. We're delighted at FPA to be participating in the launch of Nick's new book, Proportional to the Mischief, International Law and U.S. Grand Strategy. Nick's many accomplishments include serving as Special Assistant for National Security Affairs to Presidents Ronald Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush, and as legal advisor to the National Security Council under Colin Powell and Brett Scowcroft. Nick has held named professorships at the Naval War College, Colgate, Hamilton, and Cornell, and served as university counsel to the State University of New York. I'm told his office was in this building. Nick is currently executive partner at the law firm of Zimpano Patricios and senior research scholar at Yale Law School. I am pleased to turn the floor over to Nick Rostow.
Now, I'm supposed to say something, I'm not quite sure what, but in any event, the book is an argument for considering international law and grand strategy, and U.S. grand strategy in particular, together. And normally, these disciplines, like so many intellectual disciplines, don't talk to each other. And so, while there are shelves and shelves of books in libraries and a long list of titles on the web in one subject or another, they don't crosshatch. And there are only two books that I know even tried, and they did a long time ago, and took a different view. The book is also a book about process. One of my bosses, Colin Powell, used to say, good process can't guarantee a good outcome, but it can prevent a lot of bad. And so, in considering the subject, process is a way in which the two disciplines can be brought together. And the book emphasizes and gives as an example of good process President Eisenhower's solarium exercise, which, as far as I know, was the only
disciplined, serious, strategic examination of options ever undertaken by an administration.
So the most important thing in his whole life is control of the Iranian nuclear arsenal. What kind of grade would you give him if you were his teacher, A, B, C, D, or F? And what would you write on his report card based on your book and the measure that you propose?
How about a 0? Educational formation as a diplomatic and military historian, and then going to law school and going to work in the State Department, where I quickly found that lawyers had to win over clients in the government, as they do in private practice, and they're not the most popular people until their clients realize that lawyers work hard and can take a lot of burdens off their shoulders, and then when clients get into trouble, they can help them sometimes get out of trouble, and sometimes clients like Frank Carlucci learned that lawyers are useful when their task is shutting down something that he was asked by President Nixon to shut down the Office of Economic Opportunity, and that's where he learned. Advisors get to tell the president, sorry, Mr. President, I was wrong, I resign. Presidents have to live with their decisions. Now, international law gave a great deal of coherence to U.S. grand strategy in the Cold War, and that's another point of the book. In important respects, the ideological battle between the communist socialist world and the West involved warring conceptions of international law. And nothing is perfect, and there's no straight line of purity on the side of the United States and impurity on the side of the Soviet Union. But it was a theme, and a noticeable and visible theme to the Cold War. And it gave not only coherence, but a way of evaluating U.S. national interests in a world in which, a U.S. world in which there's so many voices who insist on being heard and having a role in defining what those interests are. It helps the President, the Congress, the American people sort of grope for what's important and what's less important. The book argues that the post-Cold War period has seen U.S. grand strategy, if it existed, tethered only erratically to the legal core of the Cold War grand strategy. And the defense of the most important principles of international law that really lie at the foundation of everything, the prohibition on the threat or use of force, except in self-defense, has gone out the window. And so we too often fall back on Thucydides' Melian dialogue. The result, in my view, is nothing short of catastrophic.
I hope it's shorter than that. There's the best Bronzino in Westchester County is run by a Guatemalan. He grew up on a farm, and he told me that a president of Guatemala campaigned to control the United Fruit Company. This was in the early 1950s. And by the way, my father, full disclosure, worked for the United Fruit Company. And he says that everybody in Guatemala knows that the U.S. government removed the elected president of Guatemala because of the United Fruit Company. And when we talk about mischief and sovereign states, why did the U.S. overrule the people of Guatemala?
Well,
The question that I have for you, Nick, is how do you see his vision being translated so that international law can be enforced. Because he did set out this idea that the Security Council would play a very vigorous role in maintaining the peace. What's your assessment of the Security Council? What do you think needs to be done in terms of Security Council reform to encourage the enforcement of international law?
Enforcement has always been the issue, the question raised: how can there be international law without enforcement? Just as the Trump administration and the Canadians. I mean, there are ways and ways of enforcing things. When Trump started off by going after Canada on trade, suddenly, we've lost those bills again. Where did they go? And lines of trucks at the border, and things grind to a halt, and then you have to find a solution, and that's part of the mechanism. The United Nations essentially has been a forum where the balance of power is played out, and where the splits between the great powers have been preventing action for most of the life of the UN. There was a brief period from 1990 to probably 2003 in which the United Nations Security Council acted unanimously most of the time, except on the Middle East, and where it tried to be effective but failed miserably with respect to places like Rwanda, Congo, elsewhere. But it succeeded in the sense that it was a place where diplomacy could occur, where adversaries could meet in private and conduct diplomacy. The United States and Iran could have conversations nobody noticed, or the United States and North Korea could. But the fact of the matter is that the world is 193 countries. They don't all share the same perspective, and it's silly to think that they will. But the UN as a forum is useful, both because it has programs that do good, like the World Food Program, and as I say, is a place you can efficiently go and talk to an awful lot of states simultaneously or in work. The vision was that somehow the Allied unity in World War II would be maintained. And Allied unity in World War II wasn't that great in a lot of respects. I mean, it was effective in beating the Germans and the Japanese, but it wasn't for want of friction. And so it's how that friction is channeled, how it's controlled, and that's where the law comes in, because it defines rails within which conflict and coercion are supposed to be, it should be, confined. And that, to me, is what's really at stake in Ukraine and Iran, elsewhere.
It can find some accommodation, but if you look at China, if you look at the United States, both the major powers of the world have already violated international law. So the genie is out of the bottle, and the question is, how do you bring those significant, powerful countries back in line based on a code of conduct of international law? How can we bring them together?
Well, you have to work at it. I mean, one of the things that's interesting is that Putin justifies his invasion of Ukraine with a legal argument. China claims to own the entire South China Sea. They make a legal argument. The United States isn't making legal arguments at the moment. although the State Department Legal Advisor's Office put out a pretty good statement about Iran. But then the fellow who wrote it promptly resigned, I guess, because he didn't get the job. To me, that's a sign that international law is not dead. It's important. The most cynical countries understand that it's important, and in the long run, it provides a common language. Will it by itself accomplish anything? No. I mean, we live in a world of humans. The International Court of Justice tried to say something useful about nuclear weapons and wound up saying nothing useful about nuclear weapons. Wasted its time and everybody else's. It's up to people to make sure they're not used, and it's going to become more and more difficult as time passes. This disregard for the most fundamental rules continues unabated. Yes, sir.
It's all right. Okay. 3, 2, 1.
This gentleman's a diplomat in the U.S. like